Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. I am Kendra Brown, and I'm the president of the Upsilon Epsilon Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. We are committed to exemplifying friendship, impact, refinement, and excellence. That's UEO Fire for the citizens of our community through service, scholarships, and the execution of our international programs. That includes our AKA Connection and Social Justice activities. Since 1994, the members of our chapter have endeavored to be a local and living example of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority's legacy of service to all mankind. Our AKA Connection and Social Justice Committee understands that redistricting is a serious matter. And in partnership with the League of Women Voters, we are presenting today's event to you. We are delighted to have you join us today to discuss various topics, including redistricting, racial gerrymandering, redlining in Black and Brown communities, the Voters' Rights Act, government funding, and the role our state legislators and congressional leaders play in the redistricting process. We thank our speakers for joining us on today and invite you to join in the discussion also. Now you will hear from Janelle Griffith-Herring, who leads our AKA Connection Committee.
I'll do that again. Good morning. Thank you, Ms. Brown, for the lovely introduction and to give our guests a flavor of what the AKA Connection Committee does in our community. So I want to thank each of you for joining us on this beautiful first day of spring and for what will be an important conversation on redistricting. As mentioned earlier, the AKA Connection Committee seeks to identify and study national and international issues which impacts our community for our quality of life for both the members of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and the Baltimore County community. This committee seeks to design strategies to mobilize both groups for action. And if you joined us in 2020, you participated with us on a number of voter engagement webinars that sought to mobilize and educate Baltimore County citizens on the 2020 election cycle. Today, we are hosting the first in a series of conversation and activities that will prepare us for 2022. So it's my pleasure to turn you over to our moderator, Ms. Maria Stockton Proctor, who is a member of the AKA Connection Committee. Excuse me, Ms. Stockton Porter. Happy to turn the call over to you.
Thank you. So this morning, welcome everyone. And this morning, I'd like to introduce you to our presenter, Ms. Beth Hufnagel with the League of Women's Voters. Ms. Hufnagel has been a member of the League of Women's Voters of Howard County since 2017. Upon her recent retirement from her full-time job as an astronomy professor, she decided that she wanted to get more involved with nonpartisan politics because she believes in fair government and that it will help to heal our divided country. She was first appointed as treasurer and then upgraded to president. In her spare time, she enjoys political education and advocacy, choral singing. She's a Sudoku expert. She likes gardening and ballroom dancing. So without further ado, I hand over the program to Ms. Beth Hufnagel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm delighted to be here with you today. And we're going to talk about redistricting. In other words, how to draw fair maps so that the voters get the representative that they have voted for and someone who is in their community of interest as well. So we're ready for the PowerPoint. And it's people-powered fair maps. So it's fair maps for election districts. That's what we're talking about. Next slide, please. And you see this picture is at the Supreme Court. So these matters often end up in the courts. because the legislators do not resolve them. So I always work in a coalition. At this point, it's Common Cause, the League of Women Voters, No More Gerrymandering in Maryland, and Represent Maryland. And this summer, we're starting to put together a brand new coalition called Fair Maps Maryland. Next slide, please. So the whole thing is kicked off by the census. People keep moving. They have a baby. They get married. They want to be near their parents. They get a new job. And Americans are notorious for moving around. The problem is we're required to have the same number of people in every election district. That's a kind of the one standard we've got. So people move, we have to change the lines of the districts, redraw the lines. So the first step is they take the census and they figure how many people are living in each state. So Maryland, we think, has grown in population. However, not as much as some other states. Some states have actually lost some people. So we think Maryland will retain the same number of congressmen, 8, but some other states like California will lose one. We expect Texas will gain one. Why do I talk about expect? Because these numbers are not expected to come out until April of this year. They should have been out in December, but you know, COVID is now a 4-letter word. Next slide, please. I'm going to play you a little video that explains the basics because I can talk in words, but you know, pictures are much better. So it's very short. It's only a few minutes. So, and then we'll be back right after.
Political power in Congress is based around population. Bigger states, like California and Texas, are rewarded with more seats than smaller states, like Rhode Island and Delaware. Since our population is constantly changing, people move, have babies, die, the Constitution requires that a census be held every 10 years to count the people of each state. Census numbers are used in the process of reapportionment to determine how many of the 435 congressional seats each state gets. As states grow in population, they get more seats, and they take those seats from states that have grown less quickly. After each reapportionment, every state must alter the boundaries of their congressional districts to account for these changes. This is called redistricting. The United States is the only advanced democracy in the world where politicians directly participate in the districting process. Why does this matter? You live in a district. Many districts, actually. Congressional, state senate, assembly, city council, school. Everyone in America lives in districts. All districts are bounded by lines. The way district lines are drawn can determine who represents you for decades at a time.
An example of that would be that you're supposed someone didn't like your county councilman, and they said, well, we are going to move his house out of his district, so he no longer has the same district. That is the type of shenanigans that we call gerrymandering. There are some standards, and the federal, there's one person, one vote, means that same number of people. And the Federal Voting Rights Acts prohibits racial discrimination. You can't marginalize minority communities either by making sure there's just a small amount of the minorities with the majority, or shoving them all into one little district. Well, then that district is overwhelmed by the voting rights for the other district. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to talk about Maryland, of course. Even though some of the videos may be about, you know, some other states as well, it's everywhere. And in this Maryland Constitution, we have more standards. They have to be compact. Doesn't mean square or round, but not scattered all over the place. Contiguous, meaning touching each other. And they have to pay attention to the Chesapeake Bay, Baltimore City, and so on. However, the Maryland Constitution says nothing about congressional districts, the federal congressmen that go. Now, you might be saying, why are you not talking about the senators? Both senators are at large. So there is no district. Their district is the entire state of Maryland. And notice there's no districts. Therefore, because Maryland is 55% Democratic, if you have no districts, everybody at large, then they're going to end up being Democratic. Next slide, please. Just to make sure you're not completely bored by me talking. And of course, as someone mentioned, I'm a former professor, so a little quiz for you. In the 2011, 10 years ago, this happens every 10 years, 174,000 Marylanders needed to move based on the reallocation. How many were actually moved to different congressional districts? So we're going to have a poll come up soon that you can click on. So make your choice with either your mouse or your touch screen. So go ahead and make your choice, and we're going to then throw up the totals. No, we won't know what you said, but we're going to throw up the totals for everyone who actually takes it. And I'm going to take a guess at what would be right. So I've got mine, made my selection, and I submitted it. And in a few seconds, we're going to see what the results were. We'll give you 15 more seconds to decide which one you like. And I'll make a confession for you. I have done this particular presentation a number of times, but always face to face. So this is my first webinar, and I've been so impressed with your technology. So thank you very much. And I think, Kim, I think we're ready to see the results of the poll. You all have, so the results were, for those of you who are listening, 200,000, in other words, close to 174,000. The plurality of you thought that, and then 28%, 500,000, and 11% went, they did 1 million. Well, let's have the next slide, and the answer is 1.5 million. What were they doing? They moved around a third of the state's residents when they only had to move, what, 10%? What was going on? Well, obviously, whatever was going on, it was not based on the census. This was not what it was. So if you don't understand the numbers, then there had to be a soft reason. There had to be something else going on. And let's go to the next slide. Talk about what it was, and it is gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is historical. It happened way back, and it's a US tradition to do this, unfortunately, and the league would like this to stop being a tradition. And what it does is the people in charge, I don't care who they are, green, white, black, Republican, Democrat, whoever is in charge gets very tempted to draw the lines to benefit themselves, and usually with the most benign of motives, because their party, their group, whatever they're doing, they want to make government better. That is usually the decision given. And as it turns out, and I am embarrassed to say this, Maryland as a state is one of the worst. We have the bizarrest looking districts, and they're crunched out and they're all over the place. And I'll show you some in a little bit. But let's go back, and gerrymander is such a weird name, and it is historical, like most things that go back a few hundred years. The names are odd and not names that we use anymore. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll play another little video about why it's gerrymandering.
Oh, hello there. I'm Elbridge Gerry, and today is my 271st birthday. Who is Elbridge Gerry, you ask? A fair question. Let's check out my Wikipedia page. Let's see. A signer of the Declaration of Independence. Pretty cool, pretty cool. Former governor of Massachusetts. All right. 5th Vice President of the United States. Nice. Helped push for the Bill of Rights. You're welcome. Gerrymandering? Is that still a thing? Oh, man, that's so embarrassing. All right. right. So the deal with gerrymandering is that way back in 1812, when my party was in control of the Massachusetts legislature, we redrew the state's voting maps to unfairly favor our own party. I wasn't a big fan of that, but I signed off on it anyway. Anywho, some wise guy at the local newspaper thought the map looked like a salamander, threw that together with my name, Gary, and coined the word gerrymander, or gerrymander as most people say today. After all I've done, I can't believe I'm still best known for gerrymandering. And I can't believe that after 200 years, you still let gerrymandering happen. I mean, you actually still let politicians draw their own voting maps? Oh, brother. So tell you what, my one birthday wish is for gerrymandering to end once and for all. Tell your lawmakers that you want independent redistricting reform. Help me reclaim my name and end gerrymandering now. Oh, happy birthday to me.
As you probably guessed, because Maryland has some of the worst gerrymandering, our politicians do indeed select our districts. They select both the congressional for the federal, and they also draw the legislative lines for our delegates down in Maryland, the senators down in Annapolis, and then the counties also redistrict, but they do their own individual commissions. So just to check, let's stick with congressional districts because it's easier, because there's only how many? Let's see. Let's take a poll on this one. How many congressmen does Maryland have? Okay, and since we've already given the answer, maybe we won't do a poll on this one. I'm sure you all know it's 8. And let's go to the next slide. Let's take a look at some pictures of Baltimore County. Again, pictures are always better. So hit enter, would you please, Kim? So let's, and this is historical. So we're going back in 1970, and you can see there's Baltimore City, and then there's Baltimore County going all around it. And we have 3 congressional districts. These are congressional districts, and there's 8. And there's 3 that go all around, if I'm counting correctly. You can see Baltimore City. And now let's see what happens in the next 10 years. So hit the enter again, please. Now notice what's happening here. We're starting to see a sliding out, a squeezing of the districts. They're no longer compact. Remember, compactness is not a rule. You don't have to do that. You can't racial gerrymandering, but you don't have to be compact. You can pull them out, slice them, dice them any way you like. So next one. Now what is happening? 1, you have a party more and more in power, and 2, computers. We all love technology sometimes, but what it makes it easier to get what you want just by asking questions. Next slide, please. So what happened in last 10 years, 20 years ago? The governor appointed an advisory commission, and it was president of the Senate. Let's count how many Democrats. Speaker of the House, 2 Democratic allies, and 1 Republican. Keep in mind, 55% Democrat registration, 25% of Republicans, 35% Republicans, and 20% are not aligned to either one. The insiders are drawing them, and you can tell what's going to happen. Next slide, please. So not only do they do what they wish, but the public isn't invited. If they do have held hearings, they're before there's actual map. Now you all know somebody says, I'm going to draft a letter, and it all sounds good. Then you see the letter and you go, well, wait a minute, this. Well, they don't really want any impact, apparently. And they usually voted on a special session. That's not going to happen this year. And what happened in 2011 is the governor presented a map. Legislature said, fine, rubber stamped it, and there it was. Next slide. And here are the districts as of 10 years ago. Again, we do not know what they're going to look like in 2021, and we won't know till 2022 this time. They'll be a little slower, but notice what's happening over on the left side of the picture. What happened was there's a bunch of Republicans over there. So what they did is they went over to Montgomery County and pulled in a bunch of Democrats to dilute the minorities' vote. And they made that a majority Democratic. And I am told by rumor that they could have given us 8 Democratic congressmen if they wish, but the governor just said, well, maybe that's a little too obvious, so stop doing that. But it could happen. It could happen this time. Next slide, please. Because they have to be contiguous, sometimes they have this tiny, tiny little stretch, just like a street long, or just, you know, a block of houses long that holds things together. And it ends up, you can just be walking from one district to the other. There's 3 districts there. You can just walk from one congressional district in about a minute, which is about as silly as it sounds, because what do those people in the middle have in common with the other people politically? Next slide, please. Now, we also do legislative districts. There are a few more rules for this one. They need to be more compact. So you'll notice they're not stretched out all over the place for the legislature. There's 141 delegates to go, and they're allocated this way. And it's a little better because there are more standards. So what do we want? Next slide, please. What is the league looking for? And what do we think every person who wants fair government would like to see? A process. So the first process is standards, congressional districts. All we have are federals. We have nothing. We don't even have the ones that are for the legislative districts. The next, number 2 for the process. You need somebody, not the politicians, to be drawing the map. Doesn't mean the politicians can't look at it and approve it, but you need to have someone who's not in there doing it. And number 3. And we need to have transparency and public input so people can get a chance to say what they think about this. Next slide, please. And in 2021, so the governor, who's Republican, now has a commission with 3 co-chairs. They're appointed, and that's where they're at. They're in the selection process now. So they need 6 more commissioners. So we'll have 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and 3 unaligned. And as you can imagine, because the Democrats are 55% of it, if they had wanted to draw up a commission, which they chose not to, they might have said, well, we want 5 Democrats on there. They're not drawn by insiders. Next one, please. So we're committed to fighting for standards, process, independent commission, citizens, redistricting reform commission. And for the governors, we're committed to observing what they do. And we want standards to be the same as they already are: equal population, contiguity, that means they're touching each other and not, you know, stretched out all over the place, and compactness. For example, for contiguity, I'm sorry, they got to touch each other. So get that straight. Next slide, please. So we're trying. The legislators been trying. We've got a lot of reform bills. We have 2 we've been following, and we think that they're going to be the same thing. They're going to be ignored and die in committee. We did last year, we had a wonderful fair maps by Delegate Wilkins and Senator Washington, and we were very hopeful of those. They aligned with our positions, but COVID, they got cut short because of the COVID, and legislator had to stop short, so they didn't get a chance to get to them. And there were other priorities this year, so they didn't come up this year. Next slide, please. And Supreme Court. So it was taken to the Supreme Court, and Maryland took it, and North Carolina took it. Maryland was Democrats doing it, North Carolina's Republicans do it. Supreme Court, what did they say? Kim? Oh, partisan gerrymandering, not our business. Do what you want. So next slide. The league is not happy, and nobody who wants fair government should be happy. So what it says are, well, waiting for federal action is not realistic. The states need to take care of that. Now, House HR 1 that the Biden administration presented, it does call for independent commissions, but it calls for them for everybody all at once. However, 18 other states, Virginia, have already done this. So they're following behind. So elections should be about one person, one vote, not at the party in power, whoever it is, not the party in power just deciding to entrench themselves even more. These non-competitive districts where nobody can win, but in the primary, we'd like to see a more fair process. So next one. Next slide, please. So why is it so hard? The congressional legislative districts are basically two people, Speaker of the House and the Senate President. And we ask them, what are you doing? And we get stonewalled. And it's going to be really hard to turn it over. One way to do it, citizen demand. The other way is if it gets so tied up in courts, as happened in Virginia, that people, everybody just gets tired of the whole thing. So that's the other way you get this done. So next slide. So it can be done and it has been done. So we're going to try from this one. So the percentage of citizens who would like to have redistricting reform is, take a shot at it. And what's your percentage? I'm going to use on my touch screen. And submit it. Take 5 more seconds. Okay. Kim, what do we got? You're starting to get the idea. Yes, indeed. So as you probably suspected, it is 73%. So 73% of US citizens think that it's a great idea for the politicians not to be drawing the districts and not choosing their own voters. Next slide, please. So here's what we're going to do about it. And I left this up. This is old. I did it on purpose because COVID has completely knocked out the special session. That will not be happening. So the numbers for Maryland will be given to September 30th. That's when the Census Bureau will provide the numbers. It's exactly the population right down to the precinct level. In census blocks, will provide that to the states. However, in Maryland, we're required to reallocate the prison population. The federal government Census Bureau counts them where they are sitting in prison. Maryland wants them counted at their hometown, last known address. So that's going to take up to another month. I sincerely hope not. And then October 30th, they'll be available. And then they'll go right into the legislature. So you're going to skip this special session, go right to the 2022 legislative session. So that's going to be busy, busy. And I hope we're getting everything we need out of this 2021, because 2022 is going to be very busy between the gubernatorial elections and legislative session. The difficult part for a lot of legislators is they don't know if they're living in their own district because the lines aren't drawn yet. And yet you're required to declare for a seat 6 months before the general election. So this is going to be awkward. And then what we're thinking is the governor's commission will come up with a map. The MGA, the Maryland General Assembly, will come up with a map. They won't look alike. Both sides will sue each other and we'll end up back in court, which just drags out the whole process and is very expensive. Next slide. So spread the word. This has to be from below. This has to be a grassroots. We have a pledge you can support and share it. And we have an empowerment toolkit on our webpage. at www.lwvmd.org. And I'll say that again, I'll leave that up for a little bit. We are also, I will tell you what we're working on right now. I'm the lead of the redistricting advocacy team. What we'd like to do is we'd like to reach out to the people who are underrepresented politically. They don't report in the census tract. They're not getting their vaccinations. We want to reach out to those people and facilitate them drawing something called community of interest maps, and then publish them out to the legislator, give them to the governor's commission. They've already said, the governor's commission has said they're delighted, they want them, they want to see them, and says, okay, our church is here, our ethnic community is here. Here it is geographically. Do not split us up. So that's what our outreach is going to be through the summer, to reach out to them. And the next, and thank you for putting that in the chat. And the next slide, please. We are going to have, I noticed there's a few in the chat, but I'm hoping you'll take the next 5 or 10 minutes to put additional questions into the chat. Only 11, I hope there's more than that. And then there's people powered, the O with the dot on it, sorry about that, that's actually an underscore. And you can follow us, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you can email, and actually that's me, you can email Beth Hufnagel, but redistricting@lwvmd.org, and that will get to me. Questions, suggestions, you would like to help out, you want to join, we'd love to have you. Thank you very much. I finished early, so I think that's kind of unusual. I know. Appreciate it very much. And I'm looking forward to your questions. Okay, and a few more are popping in there, so feel free if something occurs to you. We won't be having questions right away. We're going to be having a few more addresses first. So I'll give you a chance to think about and put in more of your questions in the chat. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Hufnagel, for a wonderful presentation. And now I would like to introduce our panel members. First, we will have Councilman Julian Jones, Jr., who was born and raised in East Baltimore. He grew up in a working class family. His father, Julian Sr., worked at Bethlehem Steel for 43 years, and his mother retired from Baltimore City Public Schools after teaching for 36 years. Julian Jones excelled in the fire department, becoming the first African-American officer in the department's history. He was the first African-American lieutenant, captain, and battalion's chief. Julian's drive and motivation has always been to serve the community. Elected to the county council in 2014 and is twice elected the chair of the council. He is a devoted family man and a tireless champion of social justice and working families. Chief Jones will use his courage, commitment, conviction, and leadership skills to fight for our community and families. The next panelist you will hear will be Ms. Janice Washington. Ms. Janice Washington is a native of Dallas, Texas. She resides in Owings Mills, Maryland, and she received her formal education in the Dallas Public Schools and graduated from the University of North Texas with a BA degree in government and a Master's of Teaching degree from Goucher College. Ms. Washington also represented the NAACP as she was hired by Roy Wilkins, the executive director, to serve. And she has traveled across the country organizing youth and college chapters during her 27 years with the NAACP. After leaving the NAACP, Janice served for 18 years as a campaign organizer and legislative aide to Delegate Emmett Burns of the 10th Legislative District, Baltimore County. She's a proud mom and grandmom. So next, you will hear from Councilman Julian Jones. Councilman Jones, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's good to see everyone here, and certainly enjoyed Beth's presentation, and thank you for having me. I will really be somewhat brief. You know, when you think about redistricting across the country, it's important that we never forget what we're talking about. And clearly, all across the country, so many states, you have gerrymandering taking place. And really, if you just look at, like, for me, like the big picture is like the only way we could get it done, in my opinion, is at a national level. That it's almost like everybody has to disarm at the same time, because absent that, I would ask you, if you want to do a poll, how many people here want to have more Republicans represent Maryland and change the balance of power in DC? How many people want that to happen, right? So that's what you're talking about. So if we were to change our redistricting plan and allow Hogan or others to have more Republicans get elected, now all of a sudden you will find if the Republicans aren't doing the same thing, you put yourself at a disadvantage. But that's my very, very partisan 2 cents, if you will. Now, here in Baltimore County, we have the same constraints, if you will, and in that right now we have a plan that's outlined by our county code. And our plan, we've already appointed. We had to have this done by basically I want to say, like, by March 1st, we had to have a commission established. So the county code says we had to have a 5-member commission established for redistricting. We already have that commission. They've been appointed, and basically the way it works, we have 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans. Because on the county council, we have 4 Democrats and 3 Republicans. And for the most part, we all agree on things. We care about things that make the citizens of Baltimore County have a better quality of life, make sure Baltimore County is running well. But there are times when there are differences of opinion. When there's, for example, when we wanted to do a pilot program and give free breakfast and free lunch to kids in Dundalk, and we had the person from Dundalk say, I don't want another government program, and I don't want the kids to get free breakfast and free lunch. Now, that was an ideology difference, whereas he has a whole different point of view as it relates to government. So that's our commission. We have 5 people on it. And by law, this commission must have 3 public hearings, and they will forward their plans to the county council, where we will vote on it, on what they produce, or what somebody else produced, because we can make adjustments as well. And at the end of the day, we have to have 5 votes for it to pass. So that means at least 1 Republican in this case will have to go along with the plan. So, as was mentioned by Beth earlier, basically, we're not going to get the information from the federal government until September the 30th. It used to be March 31st, but now it's September the 30th due to COVID. And the Redistricting Commission must have their 3 hearings and produce a plan by October the 15th. Now, we will have a little bit more information. A little more time, because we have until January the 31st to produce it. Give me 1 second while I yell at my phone. Okay, sorry about that. So anyway, yeah, so that's where we are. We have until January 31st to produce it. So when during the 3 hearings that people will have an opportunity, those 3 hearings are going to be, as you can see, between October the 15th and between September the 30th and October the 15th. Those are going to be the 3 times for the hearings. And people can basically, once the information is available, they can bring forth their own maps. They can ask questions. They can lobby the council members. We don't see a big change here in Baltimore County because for the most part, we have to follow the same rules in terms of, it must be compact, continuous, and substantially equal in population. We can go plus or minus like 10% is the deviation that we sort of settled on due to court challenges and whatnot. So that's basically where I foresee my guess. Maybe a precinct 2 switching from here and there, but I guess don't see a big change.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Now we will proceed with Miss Janice Washington.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. And I want to thank Ms. Kendra Brown, President of Upsilon Epsilon Omega Chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Ms. Janelle Griffin-Herring, the Chairman of the Connection Committee of UEO, and Maria Stockton Porter, who is the lead organizer of this event. A very important event, and I want to thank them immensely for inviting me to share my perspective on redistricting. I also appreciate serving on this panel with Ms. Beth Hufnagel from the League of Women Voters and from Councilman and with Councilman Julian Jones, my councilman. I also want to point out that I worked for Baltimore County Schools for 18 years as a reading and special ed teacher. In my reading class, I had Councilman Jones's daughter, Sanaa Jones, was one of my bright students in the 6th grade at Sudbrook Magnet Middle School. So I appreciate this opportunity to share my perspective. As a 35-year resident of Baltimore County, a former national director of the NAACP, a former educator of Baltimore County Public Schools, and a longtime civil rights activist, I do care about redistricting because it is a process where the community, that means me and you, can have a say in how lines are drawn to determine councilmatic districts for the county that we live, Baltimore County, and legislative districts for the state that we live in, the state of Maryland. And I really appreciate the information that Beth showed, because she gave me a lot of new information that I was not aware of. And I wondered about the redistricting makeup of Maryland and Baltimore County, but never knew the details. And so you've given us a lot of details. I also serve as the Maryland State Connection Chair, which all of our chapters across the state of Maryland are involved in looking at redistricting. And I want to let you know, Beth, that I will be sharing this information and getting them involved in partnering with their local League of Women Voters to consider and look at fair maps. So I'll be following up with you on that. So why is redistricting important? The next slide, please. It has to do with you. You are counted in our population. And, the United States has over 300 million people. And by you being counted, you have a say-so on what goes on in this country. Next slide, please. But when we come closer to home, Baltimore County, the demographics show this, that we have a population of over 800 million people. We are the 3rd most populated county in Maryland. The county is divided by race and ethnicity, with whites being 57% of the population, Blacks being 28%, and Asians 6%. And the median income is about $76,000. The median age in this county is about 39 years old. Next slide, please. So by the year 2011, this is as a result of the 2010 census count, America's demographics are greatly changing, and we will become a much more diverse nation. Now, this is as a result of research done by the NAACP and Legal Defense Fund. So what are the changes that are reflecting now in our counties and in our cities? Groups, African Americans, Asians, Latinos, Native Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. These are ethnic groups that are now 1/2 of the residents in 1 out of every 10 of the nation's counties. This is according to the Census Bureau of 2010. So ethnic race and ethnic groups do matter, and they do count in the number of people that live in our communities, and we should all be concerned about representation. So the changing face of America impacts electoral politics. So we ought to be asking the questions, are minorities fairly represented at all levels of politics? Do we have an equal voice and an equal opportunity to elect representatives who consider our needs and our interests? How can our communities participate? How can we ensure that our interests are being heard and represented by our elected officials? And how can we ensure that the voting strength of our communities is not weakened? These are questions that we are pondering now, and today are the questions that each and every one of us should be asking. Next slide, please. The United States and the Census Bureau, we've already seen slides from Beth's presentation that the census is determined by the federal government every 10 years for reapportionment, distributing the seats, among other purposes. The census count begins each decade, and the accuracy of the census count is very important, as the distribution of federal funds to the local level and distribution of political power of all levels of government depend on it. Now, the census is important because redistricting is based upon the population data collected by the decennial census. The political lines are drawn so that each district is equal in population size based on the decennial census data. Next slide. So this process that we call redistricting will determine how our local school board, city council, county council, state legislative, and congressional districts are drawn. Next slide. So what questions should we ask? Who may participate in the redistricting process? That who is one word, anyone. Or they could be interested parties, including nonprofit organizations, community leaders, and political parties may use maps and population counts of their states, counties, and cities to advocate for district boundaries should be drawn. If our group, the AKAs, wanted to draw a map, we could do that. Or if you were a part of any other organization or group or a community group, you could draw your own map to go before these commissions in order for those maps to be considered, so you're sure that your representation is going to be protected. Why should I participate in the redistricting process? Why? Because it gives your community a voice on who and how your representation will take place. It can also encourage citizens to register, to vote, and remain politically engaged. And it can help lead to the adoption of redistricting plans that provide minority communities a meaningful opportunity to elect candidates who represent their interests and issues. So what happens when redistricting plans are adopted without meaningful participation by minority groups? If we're not involved, what happens? Minority residents are often had little say in the creation of redistricting plans approved by state legislatures. Minority communities were divided up, fractured, and placed into many different districts known as cracking. In other instances, they were unnecessarily concentrated in a small number of districts, which prevents fair representation across a greater number of districts known as packing. And since the 80s and 90s, we have seen progress, but largely attributed to, afforded by the Voting Rights Act, and more engagement of minority communities in redistricting process. In Baltimore County, we understand that there are 7 districts. African Americans represent about 200,000 of the 800,000 people in this county. And so are we satisfied with having one councilmanic district with a representation of an African American, or should there be more? Those questions should be asked to assure that we have proper representation. Next slide, please. Now, the AKA, the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, is very much engaged in trying to educate the community about laws and bills that are impacting our lives. In the state of Maryland, we have 21 chapters, and we engage them in advocacy by having an AKA Day at the Capitol. This year we had, because of the pandemic, we had to have a virtual AKA Day. Usually it's in person, but we had 924 AKA members registered, and that signified a great interest in the legislative process. And so we were following bills. So on our agenda, at the top of our agenda had been the equal funding for historically Black colleges and universities. We have 4 in this state that were discriminated against in terms of funding. And so our advocacy, joining with other coalitions, helped to get the bills passed that would provide over $500 million to our HBCUs to upgrade their programs, to support their students, and so forth. It was resisted by the governor, but because of the pandemic that we found ourselves in 2020. But in this legislative session, with the leadership of the Speaker of the House and others, the House and the Senate overrode the governor's veto, and those bills were passed to fund the HBCUs. Now, the other matters that are of concern to us is police reform. And this session, a number of police reform bills were passed, and the AKA supported it. In addition to that, we have been working to make sure that the Affordable Care Act is upgraded and restored so people can have adequate health. We're concerned about women's health. And so we're following bills as it relates to women's health. Building economic legacy, supporting federal funding and other provisions to enhance financial literacy and entrepreneurship. In addition to that, we are concerned about the arts, to improve the arts for our students. Voting rights is #1 issue on the national level and on the state and local level. We are aware of all of the tactics that are being tried now to suppress voter registration and the vote. And so we will be actively engaged in advocating for the passage of the federal legislation, House Bill #1 and House Bill 4, that will protect our people across the country against voter suppression tactics. We appreciate, again, this opportunity to speak about redistricting And we're going to be encouraging our chapters across the state of Maryland to host similar sessions as this one. We thank UEO for taking the leadership. We have we are recommending one of our members in the AKAs to be on that state commission for redistricting. Her name is Tamara Davis Brown. She's an attorney. She has experience in redistricting, and she represents Upsilon Tau Omega of the AKAs. And so we've been sending letters to the governor to appoint her as one of the members of the commission, and we certainly hope that that will come to pass. So again, thank you for this opportunity, and we invite everyone to stay engaged, be involved, and let your voices be heard about redistricting in Baltimore County as well as in the state of Maryland. Thank you. In Baltimore County as well as in the state of Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Washington. Ms. Washington, I'm sorry. Thank you so much to both of you. And now we will open up our discussion to questions and answers. The first question we have from someone is, how do we ensure that representation regarding leadership is reflective of what the district in Baltimore County looks like when redistricting occurs? Anybody want to answer? You could just jump right in.
I'm a little confused about the question. What did it say? How do we ensure?
Yes, they're asking, how do we make sure that the representation basically with the leadership is there? And I guess from what you were saying, that you guys appoint a committee, so it's nothing we can do.
Oh, I mean, people can certainly, like I said, there's going to be 3 hearings. That's in the code. So people can always weigh in. They can produce their own maps. They can, lobby the council, because after the commission finishes its work, the council has until, I want to say, March the 30th. No, we have until January 31st to have this done. So it's a short period of time, especially when you look at somebody thinking about running for office. The lines are going to change. You only have a couple of months later, or maybe 1 month or so before you have to file for office. But with us, the redistricting cannot add a district. Only thing it can do is move the maps, making sure each district have relatively the same amount of people, plus or minus 10%. And it be compact, continuous, and but the important thing to remember, this is a political process.
Okay.
That's like, it's a political process. So you can do other things, like when you get the information from the federal government, it's going to say the race, it's going to say the gender, it's going to give a lot of information about those people that can join the lines. And for the most part, to Ms. Washington's credit, across the country, we've seen some horrible things done in terms of minimizing the vote of minorities. So in Baltimore County, maybe not so much, because Baltimore County is not that big. Our boundaries is clear, and unless you come up with something really, really, really different, I don't see the lines changing but so much, other than around the edges.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is, which we've all are concerned about, how to reach the underserved communities. They're asking how we can do a better job with that and getting the underserved communities involved in the process.
The League is developing with coalition members, particularly we're starting with Common Cause, but we're reaching out to other people, and we're doing Fair Maps Maryland campaign over the summer, and that's to facilitate and reaching out to partners who are already working with the underserved. and to explain, to show them how to draw community maps, and then bring it to these redistricting commissions and say, don't break up our city, don't break up our community. And here it is. And they probably don't know where that is. So this is new information for them.
Yes, thank you for that. Another question says, does gerrymandering impact local and state government elections more than federal elections?
I would say that it's all impactful. You know, it affects our federal congressmen. It does not affect the senators because they're at large for every state, true for every state. It also affects your delegates in Annapolis. It affects your senators in Annapolis. It affects your county council, or if you're still under commissioners, but it also affects the Board of Election, because they then, after the county council districts, then they also need to look at their lines. So it goes all the way from the top, all the way to the bottom, and impacts the whole thing.
I would just say that, you know, at a lot of times at the local level, in other words, the smaller the districts are, or the smaller the jurisdiction, the less opportunity you have to make big swings. That's not to say it can't happen, but you see it more so at the federal level or at the state level, because in the jurisdictions is, you know, how would you somehow connect me in Randallstown to the African Americans in Dundalk and Turner Station? Like, how would you do that, right? It would be crazy to even try to do it. But that we see it on the federal level, where you see those skinny lines that run from one jurisdiction to another, that go from Baltimore to Harford County and around the Eastern Shore. And, you know, it's a little different story there. Not so much, I think, at least not in Baltimore County.
Well, you know, to also what you were saying about how about drawing the lines from like Dundalk to like Randallstown, someone asked how can a plan, are there any current or future plans? And they were asking about redistricting just for Randallstown. So I guess they need to understand that it's not just for Randallstown.
Yeah, I use Randallstown as an example. I was just talking about connecting two groups of like African Americans, if you will. But the plan, like District 4 covers Woodlawn, Randallstown, Owings Mills, Reisterstown, Woodstock, Windsor Mill, you know, and all of those things in between. So this plan is simply this plan, you cannot draw new maps, right? So if you think about Baltimore County, you look at the map and you look at Baltimore County and you have District 1, District 4, District 2, District 5, District 6, District 7. So how do you shift it a little bit here or there, but you're not going to have any crazy lines drawn, because Baltimore County 1, 4, 3, 5, 6, and 7, you know, like right around the clock.
Okay, thank you. So another question is, someone was asking if gerrymandering is still allowed. Sorry about that. Why is gerrymandering still allowed if we understand its negative implications on our communities of color?
Well, first in general, gerrymandering is a tool of those in power, whoever is in power. And whoever's in power, and they taught me this years ago when I started activism, they're not going to give up that power just because you nicely ask them. You need to push and talk and be there and observe and keep asking for what is right. And the Voting Right Act is still in play for this. It is still illegal to racially gerrymander, but you got to sue. If you think you see it, you have to sue. It's expensive. And the Supreme Court has said that it is perfectly legal to partisan gerrymander. Now, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. It's not fair and it's not right. And that's the message that I think should be out there to the people drawing the maps, the Governor's Commission, and to your representatives in the Maryland General Assembly, that you're expecting them to do better.
Well, let me just add that it is a political process, right? And we would be naive. And that's why I said our personal feeling, our personal opinion, we need to fix it on a national level. There's all these different PACs out there that if one Democratic state does something, a Republican state would do it to try to balance it out. I think you almost have to do something at the national level. But make no mistake about it. We're dealing here in Baltimore County. There's 4 Democrats, 3 Republicans, 5 people have to vote on it. So it has to be bipartisan when we're done. The state is a whole different story. But make no mistake about what you're talking about. All right. Racial gerrymandering and all of those things are absolutely horrible and wrong. And you want to make it clear. It's almost as if the Democrats and the Republicans are both doing this across the nation. And they're doing it to have power in DC. Who's going to be in charge? I'm proud that Maryland is heavily Democrat. I'm proud of that. I would not want us to change the rules and we produce more Republicans when all it's going to do is allow the Republicans to take over in DC, which we've seen what that's done. So if we're going to change the rules across the nation where everybody's going to be fair, so be it. But I would be against changes that will disrupt the power structure here. Now, Hogan is a Republican. Mm-hmm. So when he started talking about fair districts and this, that, and the other, make no mistake about it. His plan is to produce more Republican congressmen, which we only have 1 in the state of Maryland. Now that's his plan. Or more Republican state senators or state delegates or whatever. I mean, this is a political process. Now, like I said, as it relates to gerrymandering people of color, putting them in different districts to minimize their power, I'm absolutely positively appalled by that, and we should do it, whatever we can to fix it. We just have to be careful that, in my opinion, many of these fights are not here in Maryland. Many of these fights need to take place at other places who are not interested in any changes at all. So, it's something we have to think about because you have a couple of things operating. You have underserved communities, you have people of color, and you have gerrymandering taking place to minimize their power. But at the same time, you have this big political process where the Democrats and Republicans are fighting for the control in DC. And that's what drives the national congressional districts. That's what's driving that bus.
Okay, our next question is, how can our representation help to avert or mitigate the 15 active hate groups identified in 2020? More than likely, it will increase this year. Anyone want to tackle that one?
I'll just say this. I'm not sure that somebody else wants to. I mean, I think it was horrible what this country went through under the direction of Donald Trump. I think he didn't just sound dog whistles. I think he made it, in some people's opinion, okay to come out and be hateful and hate other Americans and be racist and bigoted and you name it. And he fanned that flame, he poured fuel on that flame, and these people came out from underneath the rocks they were, where before many of them knew their views were out of touch. But he did that. So moving forward, let's hope under the new administration, let's hope Donald Trump just fades away and these people, and we can use the powers of the government to prosecute these people to the fullest extent of the law if they break the law or when they break the law. And hopefully they will, we can change their hearts and minds, or they can figure it out while they sit in jail if they break the law.
Yes. Someone else asked if they can get the slides because of a lot of information. I will have to double check that with you and maybe let you know at the end. I'm not sure about that.
The link slide, absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. They're already on the website, but be happy to provide them. I mean, you already have them. You're welcome to send them out if you'd like.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Washington, this question is for you, Ms. Washington. As an educator, how do you encourage the youth to be involved in politics, specifically running for offices?
Well, it's hopeful that the students have classes in government or civics. I know we used to have it in our high school and middle school instruction. So I would want to be sure that they are getting some direction, positive direction and instruction in the classroom. And I would encourage young people to get involved in their school activities, like being on the student council, or in college, there's also a student government. A lot of times that's where it starts, when getting our young people involved. Now, I got involved in my community when I was 13, and I joined the NAACP because of all of the unrest that was happening in Texas and in other states across the country. And so two of my best friends and I decided to pay 50 cents and join the NAACP. And that's where my increased activism started. And I would encourage young people who are concerned about what's going on in their community. Ask questions. If they're not happy with circumstances or the quality of life, ask about, what about more recreational activities? What about more organized games and parks? How can we get more of what the other community has? And we started asking questions, and we were taught to ask questions about the status of our life in our community. And in the process, we learned how to investigate and research and look at other communities to see what they had, as opposed to what we had in the African American community. And we learned about how decisions are made that will impact our lives, about on the local level, in the city council, in the county council, on the state level, as well as the federal government. So I encourage young people to read the newspaper, and now read the digital news to learn what's going on. Look at the news on television to determine, and begin to ask questions. Do we have to have so many guns in our community? What can we do about the violence that's impacting us? How can we improve our schools? How come we don't have more internet service? Ask the question, start there first, and then you're going to go to the right source to get the answer. All of the answers are not on the internet. I had to teach students about looking for reliable sources to respond to your questions, and all the answers are not on the internet. Go to your councilman. I'm sure Councilman Jones is open to receiving questions from young people. Go to your county council, to Councilman Johnny O. Go to your legislative leaders, the Speaker of the House, Adrian. Ask the question. And if you ask, and of course, start with your parents. They should be aware, or your guardians, about what's going on. So get them to support your inquiry and your need to know about how things are done in their particular community.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Washington.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
Ms. Washington was being sort of humble. Let me also add that she has been doing a fantastic job. We're so proud of everything she's done in the school system to educate our youth, but also, Ms. Washington also had a lot of kids for many years be involved in the political process by identifying children who want to volunteer for candidates. And they came out and they worked proposed and we had a lot of conversations and
Yes.
they learned an awful lot about not just in the school looking at books, but out there in the streets talking to the people and learning about the process. So I really believe that goes a long way, especially when I think back to my days of as a small fella working on the political campaign and how to stuff with it. Thank you.
May I also add, Maria, that Councilman Jones's daughter, whom I taught, became a leader, started speaking out, and she led a rally in Randallstown this past summer during the pandemic to encourage people to register to vote. And she's now studying to be a doctor at Xavier University. So we're really proud of her and encouraged by her interest in the political process. So thank you, Councilman Jones.
Wonderful. Well, now we need to get going with our closing remarks. Sorry, we couldn't finish all of the answers. Maybe we can save the chat and find some kind of way to answer all the rest of the questions available in the chat. This has been a wonderful conversation. So if we could start with closing remarks from our guests. Ms. Hufnagel, would you like to go first, or?
I'd like to thank Councilman Jones and Ms. Washington. I was taking notes and always learning and very much appreciate the information. So thank you.
Okay, Ms. Washington.
I want to thank our president, Kendra Brown, and Janelle Herring, Griffith Herring, for the leadership that they have taken in calling attention to redistricting in this county. The leadership is so important and many others will follow.
Yes, and Councilman Jones?
Yes, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here today. It was good to hear from Beth and Ms. Washington. Let me just say this. I am very, very proud to participate today, to be a partner with the AKAs. The work you've been doing in the community is outstanding. You've been there on so many important issues to the community, and you should be commended for all the wonderful things you do, not just with redistricting, but in so many other issues that are so important to our community. So I'm happy you think of me and you give me an opportunity to participate, because I'm very, very proud to be alongside you working to make a difference in our community. So thank you very much.
All right, well, I want to say thank you to everyone. I don't know if Ms. Janelle Griffin, do you have any remarks, or no? Anyone else have any other closing remarks?
No, you've done a wonderful job, and we thank all of our panelists. This information was very timely, and I do recall seeing in one of the Q&A chats folks wanting information on what are the steps that we should take to get this off the ground. And so we will definitely be looking at pulling together a educational flyer or some sort of information that we will post and get out to the community on summarizing what we've heard today and what are the steps that we need to take to ensure that our voices are heard. Also, we have a survey that we would like to drop into the chat, the link to the survey. We definitely look forward to getting your feedback on today's webinar, but also to give us ideas on future webinars on topics that you think definitely is of an interest to you, but would be an interest to others. So please, when you get the survey link, if you can take that survey and provide us with information, we would greatly appreciate it. So Maria, I'll turn it over to you to share the survey information and to close us out. And again, thank you to our panelists for such an engaging conversation. We appreciate you.
Yes, and thank you So the survey, as was mentioned, is in the chat. The link is there, but also upon conclusion, you may get an email as well with the link to the survey. It's very short, very easy and quick, and we just would so appreciate you answering our survey. And once again, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much to our panel members. You all were just fantastic on a Saturday morning, getting up early and being with us. We so appreciate you. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Be blessed.
Now, I'm not sure if the survey link was dropped. I thought you were going
I
to
did
drop
not
it.
see the survey.
Oh, you
Yeah.
didn't?
No.
Oh,
So we'll have to ensure that it goes out to all of the panelists
okay. Oh, I
and
thought.
attendees. And if you give me a second.